Hi, my name is Kara and today I'm going to teach you how to knit a top-down sweater. So this is a tutorial of how to knit my Bennie sweater, which is by far one of my favorite patterns. I've made like 20 of these for myself. And so the pattern's typically knit with mohair, but it's super flexible and you could actually play around with whatever yarn you like and whatever yarn matches gauge. And I'll have a whole video on how you can play around with the yarn for this. And it comes in a short sleeve or a long sleeve version. It's typically cropped because I liked cropped sweaters, but because it's a top-down sweater, you can actually lengthen it to whatever length you want it to be. And I have a short sleeve version here. And this is made in Wool and the Gang Tina tape yarn, so it is great for summer. It's very breathable. This one took me about 2 skeins of yarn. It is an extra small and it is cropped because that's how I like it fit, but you can obviously lengthen it. And I have a long sleeve version here, and this is made with the chunky mohair that this pattern was originally intended for. So the long sleeves kind of become bell sleeves at the end, so it is ultra flattering. And let's just get into it. So you might be wondering, what is a top-down sweater? And I love top-down sweaters so much because you're knitting entirely in the round and you basically only do purls at the ribbing and nowhere else. It's all knit stitches. So the way that this works is you knit it from the top down. So you start with the neckline and you slowly work your way down. And as you're working your way down, you're increasing stitches for the sleeves and the body. And eventually you're going to be separating the stitches for the sleeves from the body so that you can move your arms. It's not one big poncho. And you just keep going and knitting in the round. It's very forgiving. It's all knit stitches and it's actually pretty relaxing to do. So in order to knit this sweater, you are going to need my Bennie sweater pattern, and I'll link it in the description. You can get it on my Etsy, my Ravelry, or my website. So before you start, I recommend reading through all the instructions just to make sure you know what's going on. I'll link in the video what different parts are. And before you start, you gotta figure out your size and you're gonna wanna highlight those numbers. So all of the numbers there go from extra small to 5X. Extra small is the first number, 5X is the last number, and just go through and highlight the numbers for your size just so that you don't get confused and you don't always have to keep on counting, say, to like the 4th number if you're making a large. So for materials, you're going to need yarn, obviously, and the amount of yarn you're going to need is going to vary depending on what size and if you want long sleeve, cropped, or short sleeve. So I'll detail more about that in the pattern itself. You're also going to need 9 and 5.5 millimeter circular needles, and it's important that these are circular because you are going to be knitting in the round the entire time. You're going to need a tapestry needle, scissors, and you're also going to need 4 stitch markers. And it's important that you can tell which one is going to be the beginning of the round, so make sure that you can kind of differentiate one stitch marker from the other 3. And that can mean that it's a different color, it's a different type of stitch marker, maybe you're just really good at remembering it, but make sure that you can tell which one's the beginning of the round. Okay, so the very first step, and this is a step that you are likely to skip because I have definitely been guilty of that before, is you're going to knit a gauge swatch. And this is just to make sure that your tension is right and also so that you can see if you like the material you're knitting up. So today we're going to be working with Ching Fire Melted Baby Surrey and the colorway Oceanid. This lovely pastel rainbow vibe going on. And I've already knit my gauge swatch. I'm going to be holding this yarn double because it is a bit thinner than the suggested yarn. So holding it double helps give it more body, and I'll talk about that more in the video. So it took me 10 stitches by 16 rows to get a 4x4 square, 4 inches. And if you're having trouble with your tension, it's more important that you match the width rather than the length, so you can size up or size down needles. And if you're still having trouble with that, I recommend you can also just size down or size up because it is a pretty forgiving pattern, and you can try it on as you go so that you can just shorten it or lengthen it as you need. Now you're going to be casting on your stitches, and you're going to be using a long tail cast on. I have a more detailed tutorial on how to do that in the description. You need a long tail cast on because you need a stretchy edge so that the sweater can fit over your head. You're going to be casting on your 5.5 millimeter needles because that will give you a neater ribbing, and we'll do that next. Now that we have all the stitches for the neckline, we're going to join in the round, and this is how I do it. I like to do a magic loop method just for the first row. And there are a bunch of different ways that you can join in the round. This is just how I do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a stitch from the left needle and place it on my right needle. Then I'm going to grab a stitch from the right needle and place it on my left needle and just pulling that over. And it might be kind of tricky. You might need to hold on to the stitch. So once you've done that, you've joined in the round. place a stitch marker at the beginning of the row and make sure that this is your distinct or beginning of the row marker. Then you're just going to do a knit one, purl one, ribbing. And again, the first row is kind of difficult just because all the stitches are really tight together. So you're going to want to knit, then purl, then knit, this will just give you the stitches for your neckline, and this is super customizable for this pattern, so you can make a crew neck, you can make a mock neck, you can make a turtleneck. Just do as many rows of ribbing here as you want. Now we're going to be switching to our 9mm needles and also placing the stitch markers to denote the front from the back from the sleeves. You're going to knit as many stitches as you need for the back onto your 9mm needles. Once you have as many as you need for that, you're going to place a marker and knit how many stitches you need for the sleeve. Place a marker, then knit how many stitches you need for the front. Place a marker, and then knit as many stitches as you need for the last sleeve, and then place a marker. Or you should already have a marker there because that should denote your beginning of the round. So now you're just going to keep on knitting and increasing until you've added enough stitches and length to your sweater. We're now going to do our increases. So we've worked our way up to where we want to do a make one right. So this is a right leading increase. We're going to pick up the bar between the stitches, and it can be kind of tricky, but it's helpful to use your nail or just pick it up with your finger. And you're going to use your left needle to go from the back to the front and pick up that bar. Then you're just going to knit the stitch normally. For our left leaning increase, we are going to pick up that same bar, and again, it's helpful if you use your finger, but this time we're going to go from the front to the back with our right needle in order to pick it up. And we're also going to knit this stitch through the back loop. And this is just to make sure that there aren't any gaps with our increase. So now you're going to keep on increasing and adding length to your sweater until you have enough stitches for the sleeves and the body. And now you're going to divide the stitches for the sleeves from the stitches from the body. So you're going to knit the stitches for the back panel and knit until you reach your stitch marker that denotes the sleeves. Place the stitches for the sleeve on a scrap piece of yarn. I like to thread a tapestry needle and just kind of place those onto that piece of yarn. And once you've placed all those stitches on the extra piece of yarn, you're going to tie those off. And then you're going to start knitting the stitches for the front. And make sure that the stitch marker is still there just to denote the front from the back. And once you've knit all the stitches for the front, you're going to do the same thing for the other sleeve. You're going to place them on a scrap piece of yarn. And now you can see that the stitches for the sleeves are separated from the body, and you can kind of start to see a sweater take shape. Now we're just going to keep on adding length to our sweater, and I recommend trying it on here just so that you can see how long you want it to be. And if your sweater doesn't actually fit over your shoulders, because likely it won't because needle length cords aren't very long sometimes, or they aren't long enough, I recommend putting half of the stitches on another set of needles, and that'll just create an opening for you to fit it over your shoulders. As you're knitting, it's great to keep on trying it on just to see how much longer you want it to be, and keep in mind that you're going to want to leave about an inch from your desired length just for the ribbing. Now we're going to do the ribbing, and so we're going to switch back to the 5.5mm needle, and we're going to knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one to the end of the row. And I recommend doing about 3 to 4 rows of ribbing here. Once we've done that, we're going to cast off. And in order to cast off, it's super dependent on what type of yarn you're using. If you have a stretchier yarn, you can just do a regular old cast off. But since I'm using Surrey here, I'm going to be doing a regular cast off, but I'm going to actually use my 9mm needles here. And this will just give me a little bit more stretch to the edge, because you don't want it to be too rigid, otherwise you'll have difficulty actually getting your sweater over your shoulders. So you can also do a tubular bind off here. There's a lot of different types of stretchy cast offs that you can do, and they're all on the internet. But for now, I'm just gonna do cast off and pattern. Now that we've finished the body, we're going to pick up the stitches for the sleeves again. And so in order to do that, we're going to use our 9mm needles, and we're going to pick up the stitches that we've left on hold. And this can be kind of tricky with the first stitch, but I promise you it's definitely doable. And once you've picked up the stitches for the sleeves once again, we're going to pick up a few more stitches in the underarm to close any gap that we have. As we're picking up the stitches for the underarm, I recommend placing the beginning of round marker in between those stitches. And after we've done that, we're just going to continue to knit in the round and adding length to our sleeves, whether you want them to be short sleeve or long sleeve. And that's it. That's the entire Bennie sweater. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me or leave a comment. I hope you become as obsessed with this pattern as I am. Again, I've knit like 20 of these. I knit this pattern whenever I need to relax. And thank you so much for supporting me and my patterns, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. See ya!